We're all imperfect, and on this podcast, I'll be chatting with a variety of interesting people who are willing to make themselves vulnerable by sharing their own struggles and imperfections.
Criticism was the only form of communication that I understood. It's the way I spoke to myself. It's the way that I analysed and assessed my own performance in every facet. It's the way I viewed others, and that's the way I spoke to myself and others.
I'm Hugh Van Kylenberg from the Resilience Project.
And I'm Ryan Shelton from My Mum.
And I'm Josh from Hugh's mum.
And this is The Imperfects. Well. Hugh, I'll just handball this one to you, mate.
Very nice.
You can kick things off.
Oh.
Just some football terminology to get us going.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, okay.
That's the siren.
Very good.
Should start the app with a siren.
We should do that thing where you hold hands and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh yeah,
That's such a strange thing to do before football games.
Do they still do that? Or is
No, that's
that was
very
20
much
years old. Yeah,
very much a I was going to say a park cricket thing to do, the equivalent of local football
That's
thing. We used
yeah.
to do it.
Yeah, I did it.
I remember once our coach got us in a huddle and yelled at us and said, "Who are we?" like that, and we went, "Gary," like that, and then this is when we were like playing in the amateurs.
You're like 12 years old.
And then he said, it was like, there's a grown man's team. And then he goes, "And what are we about?" And then no one knew.
No one knew.
So
It had never been discussed.
there was a big pause, and the guy put his head up, like one of our very good mates told me, and he very shyly goes, "Honesty?"
Get out, mate.
He goes, "No, it's whatever it was."
What was it, I wonder?
I can't remember, but
Working hard.
I just remember it was honesty. No, just
Honesty?
I was next to him as well. We should have looked at made eye contact and been like, "Oh, I don't know what we're about."
Football? What
Anyway,
are our top 10 values? Oh, we haven't really discussed
It's
that.
never been. We haven't done a session yet.
Wow,
Oh, dear.
that's great. Okay, huge episode. Nathan Buckley to talk about so many things. He absolutely destroys any perceptions that I used to have about who he is or was as a player or a person.
He's so honest and vulnerable about his striving as as a younger footballer and the impact that had on everyone around him.
Yeah, and then his like realization while he was playing that it wasn't all about him. And it's like the moment he turned his sort of like focus outwards instead of inwards and started helping people at the club, and it completely changed. I mean, all that sort of stuff I found
incredible.
that fascinating. Yeah.
And as always, we'll come back at the end of the conversation and have a chat about some takeaways that we think are really useful from what Nathan Buckley had to say. But firstly, Hugh, you've got a little surprise, special.
for those of you who have seen me speak or have watched my special on Amazon, you'll know the story of Beefy. And I'm talking about Beefy because
Beefy's a friend of yours?
He's a friend of mine. I taught him back in 2009, it would have been. I was his teacher when he was in year 12, and Beefy has cerebral palsy. He was had a stroke when he was born. He has a condition called hydrocephalus, I think it is, which is too much fluid on his brain. And I'm meant to have favourites as a teacher, but I could not help it. I just love Beefy so much, and in fact, so much so I invited him down to be the water boy at my cricket club, and he took that job on with so much enthusiasm and so much passion. And he started giving us motivational talks as well on Thursday nights. They were unsolicited, but they were extremely motivational. They became solicited after a while. And I happened to be doing a fair bit of work with Collingwood Football Club at that time. And Beefy's biggest passion in life was Collingwood, still is Collingwood Football Club. And I was talking about empathy to the playing group and talked about how important it is. And Nathan Buckley was going through, I think, a bit of a rough patch as far as wins and losses concerned at the club. And he kind of put his hand up and he said, "I'm in." And he said, "I want to do something for this kid." And then after the session finished, he said, "Why don't you get him in to be a water boy for us here?" And I said, "That's the greatest thing of it. This will make his life. Anyway." And then
I
he
would
said,
love that.
Yeah. And he said, "Also, I'd love him to do a motivational talk if that's okay." And I said, "Oh, no, let's not. He'll shit himself. That's so please, you're his heroes."
Really got a keynote prepared.
Anyway, and Nathan said, "If I think he's up to it, I'm going to get him to do it." And sure enough, I surprised Beefy. The videos we can share the video on Instagram, but I surprised Beefy. He didn't know it was happening. He thought we were going for a walk together. But
It is one of the best videos.
yeah, one of
It
his
really
heroes called me on the phone, had it on speakerphone, and he said, we're actually down a water boy. We're missing a water boy. Do you know a water boy by any chance who could come to Collingwood and run water right now? I said, yes, he's in the car with me right now, and we're 2 minutes away. And so Beefy took the job on very seriously. We turned up, he ran water, and then he gave them one of the most almighty motivational talks I've ever seen.
It's amazing.
We'll share the video. But anyway, a lot of people always ask me about Beefy, and I thought, well, who better to introduce today's guest in Nathan Buckley than Nick Beefy Burke himself? So we don't often do this, but I thought we could give him a call now. He knows we're calling. He has no idea what about. He was very strict with his time. He said, I must be off the phone in 3 minutes. So this will be a quick phone call. But yeah, I'll give Beefy a call now.
Hope he picks up.
Hey, mate.
G'day, Beefy. How you going?
Not bad.
So it's myself, Hugh, and Ryan and Josh from the Imperfects podcast.
Hey,
G'day,
Beefy.
Beefy.
Hey, guys.
This week's episode of the podcast, we actually have one of your heroes. Can you guess who that might be?
Bucks.
Good. Very good.
Great
In
guess.
one. Yep.
Very well done, Beefy.
Nicky Buckley, the host of Sale of the Century from the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Very exciting.
No, we do have your hero Nathan Buckley on, and I thought, well, who better to introduce him to all our listeners? So before we do that, though, I've just told Ryan and Josh, you have the most amazing ability as a Collingwood supporter. I could say a year to you and a round, and you could tell us who Collingwood played and what the result was, can't you?
Yes.
All right. 2003, round 15.
We played 3 up the G on a Saturday. The club lost to the club legend during the week, actually, that week. Bob Rose, and Pies won by 8 goals. And I've got a funny feeling, because he did win the Brownlow. The Yorkie Bucks might have got votes in that game as well.
That is
we just had confirmation here from behind the scenes that you are correct, Beefy. Let's pick another one at random. 2011, round 2.
Played North Melbourne at Marvel. I was here that day. Actually, that was I noticed that I actually turned 20 that day, 2011. And the Pies on by 87 points.
I can't believe what I'm hearing.
And we could do this all day. You need to get back to work, Beefy.
Yeah.
And we just had confirmation that you are correct for that last one, Beefy. But if you could introduce Nathan Buckley to everyone, that'd be great.
And Beefy, while you introduce him, can you kind of like say it in like a rev up way?
Yeah.
You know, in the way that you
like
can...
you're bringing him on.
Okay.
Like you're about to bring him on stage.
Yeah.
So here he is. Well, he's within the top. He's definitely within the top 10 Collingwood players of all time, probably in the top 5. Here he is. He was the coach of Collingwood for 10 years, with good winning percentage. Nathan Buckley.
Wow. Nathan Buckley. Nathan Buckley.
Nathan Charles Buckley.
Well, to some. Not to me.
To my dad and mum when I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
Charles Buckley.
I called a friend of mine this morning who barracks for Collingwood, a very big Nathan Buckley fan, and I know he doesn't listen to the podcast. I wanted to impress him, and I said, you won't believe who we've got on today. I said, it's Nathan Charles Buckley, and I think the line wasn't good, and he goes, Charles Barkley. No, sorry.
What a disappointment.
He was a bit confused that I was calling him to tell him Charles Barkley. Anyway, no, you're right.
It's really, really exciting.
Likewise, thank you.
Really exciting, and I'm just so excited, and I feel like, and I know there's lots of stuff. We've got so much to talk about. So I forget what year it was, but there was a grand final. It must have been, maybe you were coaching and Collingwood were in the grand final. What year was that?
2018.
18. It would have been 2018. Yeah. And I was reading the paper that day, and there was an article about you in the paper that day, and I didn't really know anything about you other than what I read and watched. And in that article, the main point of the article really was that you had read The Courage to be Disliked, which is the book that changed my life completely. And
We're going to get on.
yeah, but that completely it threw me for 6. Wish I had an AFL analogy there, but completely
It knocked me out.
knocked me out because I had a perception of who I thought you were as a footy player. Never met you before, but just like, so to know that you had read that book and not only read it, but it just like you were changing your behavior based on the book. It was I felt like this synergy with you in a weird way because I was going through similar stuff. You know, being a lifelong footy head myself, and then finally seeing
Superstar.
seeing another way. So yeah, this feels like a long time coming. I'm really excited to talk.
So for those of you who don't know who Nathan Buckley is, I feel like most people will, but just in case you don't, just to give, I mean, the football stuff's great, and he has been regarded by many people as one of the greatest players to ever play AFL football, and we will talk about that a bit. But to me, knowing Nathan quite well, it's the person that he is that it just gets me so excited about the fact that he's here today. So 280 games as a player, 200.
He's under the pump here, isn't he? Already.
218
Doing
games.
this without a sheet is impressive.
218 games as a coach. So started off with the Brisbane Bears, played 20 games, went and played for Collingwood for 260 games. Then
Became Collingwood's favourite son.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then went into coaching Collingwood for 218 games. In your first year, you won it was the first ever Norwich Rising Star Award back in 1993.
31 years ago.
Yeah, there you go. Gosh,
wow.
that is amazing.
Nearly speared.
Feels bad for me. Feels bad for me.
And then 2002, Norm Smith medalist, 2003 Brownlow medal. So Norm Smith is the best player in the grand final in a losing team, which has only ever happened 3 times before. An incredible achievement. Had an incredible career. I remember the last time we caught up, we were chatting about the fact that you were at Collingwood essentially from 1994 through to
21.
2021. Wow. Collingwood won premierships in, and I'm not saying this to take the piss at all. I'm genuinely, as someone who worked so hard in his football career for the ultimate success, and it sort of, I was going to say Gert, like Gert by sea, but Collingwood, like your time was Gert by premierships.
I was Gert by premierships.
Yeah, you were. And so we'll talk about that as well today, I think. It would be great. But an incredible footballer. But as I said at the top, it's more about the person that you are that I've just been so in awe of. You, over the last, I would say, 5 years in particular, have done a lot of self-reflection. You're such a reflective person. You think so deeply about your life, your journey, the people around you, the people that you love. What has inspired this level of self-reflection in you when it would be easy not to? It would be easy not to do that stuff, but you seem to go there.
So I think it's natural. I really do. I think we all do it in some shape or form. I reflect a lot on being stereotyped and being judged, and that's anyone in a public arena.
In what way do you feel like you're stereotyped?
People have an idea of who I am. I mean, I cop FIGJAM as a label.
You copped
FIGJAM.
Yeah, right. Fuck, I'm good. Just ask me.
Yeah. That's good. I can swear.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for giving me that license. But no, so I copped that in 1993, my first year at Brisbane. Halfway through the season, I actually started, my AFL career late. I would have been overlooked in today's football. I would have been overlooked in 2 or 3 drafts because I just wasn't ready or mature enough physically, emotionally.
Were you not like a number 1 pick?
Yeah, well, I was the best player perceived as the best player outside of the AFL going into at the end of the 92 season, but I was 20 and a half by then. So I would have been like nearly like a mid-season rookie pick that had matured late over the last 18 months and then would come in sort of semi-ready to go, a bit more physically mature. But it just took me a while to find my feet. But I was faking it till I made it. I had this bravado externally that was perceived rightfully, I suppose, as arrogance and self-confidence and self-interest, which I definitely was.
So do you think because the person you were at 20 and a half, was there an element of self-awareness when it came to that? Or were you just like, I want to play footy and nothing else matters?
Well, but this is the thing, I think, going back to your question of exploring that, of trying to understand who you are, where you fit, why you see the world the way you see it. So I've wanted to understand that about myself because there's plenty of things that people have told me that this is what you do and this is who you are and this is what you think, but it's never resonated with me. But my awareness as a 20-and-a-half-year-old was really narrow. Like I just thought, if you play good footy, then you're a good person, and if I play good footy, then I'm worthy of love and affection. It goes back to probably about my relationship with my old man, and I didn't know this at the time, but I've reflected since that I was just so driven to be the best footballer I possibly could be because I thought it proved my worth as a person.
As in proved your worth to your dad?
Well, yeah, I think to me first, but then I realised later on that it was probably around that relationship with dad, which is a fundamental male, connection and relationship if you have the good fortune to have had time with your dad. Like, and not everyone has had that. But my dad's still alive now, and we have the best relationship. And as I've sort of gone through my understanding of self and unpacked a little bit with my relationship with him, well, then we've just got better and better. But
how would you describe your relationship when you were young, like growing up?
Not adversarial, but there was love there. There's no doubt there was love there. But when I reflect on it, I felt like it was just hard. I just felt like I was not enough. Like the pressure was coming from dad and schooling, football in particular. I moved around. I went to 13 schools as a kid. Mum and dad moved us around a lot. Dad was a valuer. Mum was a nurse, so they could work anywhere.
Yeah.
And we did move around, and I didn't know why we moved around, but I thought it was for work. All I knew, I was getting ripped out of schools, and then you go to a new one. But ultimately, unpacking it with dad some 25, 30 years later, he spoke to me about and shared to me that he'd been at war in Vietnam. He'd carried some form of a lot of resentment and some PTSD, drank heavily, and felt like he couldn't settle. Felt like he was in the same place for too long, got itchy feet and needed to move, needed to be somewhere else. And footy coached everywhere, and mum would go along. My sister's a couple of years younger than me, and we'd go along, and I have really positive memories of my childhood. But it's not without struggle, it's not without trauma, and it's not without a reason for these things happening. But you don't know it when you're 15, 16, 17. It's probably only in retrospect that you sort of work out, well, that's why that happened, and that's why you feel this, and that's why you see this, and that's why you've been shaped the way you're shaped. So I think it's important for every person. I advocate for every person to go back and unpack that as much as they possibly can, because I fundamentally believe that a greater sense of self and an understanding of self is the path to that contentment and happiness that we all talk about.
I'm assuming you were a good footballer as a teenager. Like
when I hit 13, I was playing footy in Canberra. I actually played for a football club, Ainsley Football Club, in the under-13s. James Hurd and I were in the same team.
Really?
In the under-13s in Canberra. You're kidding? No. And
wow. Who was better?
I can't remember him.
You can't remember him?
No, I can't remember him. I've sort of been asked, and that's not a slight. I'm not spurning him.
It absolutely is a slight.
Not a slight at all. It's just I've got a bad memory.
Yeah.
But
for the mediocre players.
Of course. But we've chatted about it since. I think he remembers me, but
but the reason I ask is because how good you were at football, was that a big part of your relationship with your dad?
Yeah, I think dad's, and then now being a parent, my boys are 17 and 15, and I have more empathy for my dad and for father figures, coaches everywhere, how difficult that role is and how much sometimes ego is attached to it, because I think if the worst of you is reflected back to you through your kids, I think that is nearly the way through all of your defensive mechanisms. It nearly gets you deeper than anything could ever get you. So
how does that play out?
Well, I just think if I can be a little bit absent-minded or not considerate at times, and then one of the boys reflects that back to me, it's like well, I can't be pissed off at it because
yeah.
you probably learnt this from me,
Yep.
and yet I don't like that, but I don't like that about myself, and now you're showing me up. Like,
Yeah.
So does that that
Yes.
sort of thing?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I was a decent footballer when I was younger, and then I didn't grow. So from 13 to about sort of 17, 18, I was a small kid, and Dad was really, I think Dad saw this as, I've got to help toughen Nathan up. I've got to bulletproof him for the harsh world that's out there. And I've got to teach him work rate. I've got to teach him honour, loyalty. I've got to, if you don't get something for nothing, if anything worthwhile is going to be difficult to achieve, and it's going to take time and effort. So Dad was really solid on that. And I felt, the way I reflect on it is that I just felt like it was over the top, overbearing, like suffocating. So I started playing tennis when I was 15 for a while because Dad didn't really care for tennis.
What a rebel.
And to the point where I injured myself at one point and I thought my tennis career was over. So that was at 15. But I sort of rebelled. And it's like anything, I suppose, when there's trauma involved, initially our reactions is to run away from it. I don't like this. It hurts too much. It's too hard. I just want to get away from it. Then I suppose you work out long enough that you can't run from some of your trauma. You got to face it, and that trauma shaped me and drove me in a very tunnel-visioned, myopic way to be a great footballer in the end. But it made it harder to be a great leader. It made it harder to be a good person, I reckon. It made it harder for me to feel comfortable in my own skin for the longest time because I'd pushed all that away for putting this idea of being a good footballer, being a good person on a pedestal.
I imagine that's confusing as well because to a degree it kind of worked.
Yeah.
Like it worked for you for a very long time because you reached the heights that you aimed to, I would assume. Was there a point where it stopped working?
Yeah, I think my coping mechanisms through my early stages, and I'd say, so got to Collingwood in end of 93 as a 21-year-old, and I was captain at 27, and I reckon it was about 28. So 2000, Mick had come in, and he was...
That's Mick Malthouse.
Mick Malthouse, sorry. It's like Madonna. You just only need to say his first name. You've made it when you can just say the first name.
I was assuming Mick Martin, but yeah.
So Mick Malthouse had come in 2000 and we missed the finals again. So I'm 28 years old. I've played for 7 or 8 years, 7 years at Collingwood. Copeland Trophy, so best and fairest winner there. Acknowledged as All-Australian a couple of times. Had achieved everything.
7 times, I think it is.
Yeah. Well done, mate.
Well done.
Still passing those tests. You're doing really well. So in the end, I think failure was the teacher for me. In that time, I'd put myself under a shitload of pressure. There'd be a couple of times a year where I'd run around the training track with tears streaming down my cheek and not really knowing what was going on. I thought it was just that pent-up energy and emotion and absolute want and desire to make the most of now, to work hard enough so that I could have what I wanted to prove that I was worthy. And I didn't know that that's what it was at the time, but I was demented in the way that I trained. I was demented in the way that that the importance that I placed on playing well, on contributing to I thought contributing to the team and being worthy. But that entire focus on self made me a negative impact on the team, a negative impact on my teammates, and made the chances of team success more difficult. And it took me until, you're probably aware of it, sort of 3 or 4 years in, and people are talking to you, but you're sort of so afraid to do it differently because you think it's like a house of cards, it'll all fall apart, and you don't want to give up what you've earned.
Yeah.
So it got to the point where I was 28 years of age, end of this 2000 season. I'd been captain for 2 years, and I'd been playing and dabbling with doing it a different way, but sort of didn't know how to. and then realised that there's enough failure here in the bigger picture in the environment, and I have to look at my contribution to it, because if anything is going to change around you, you need to have a look at yourself and change first. So that was the first big sort of shift for me.
I feel like that is a huge lesson that so many people need to learn, and often I need to remember that as well, which is the realization that the less you focus on yourself, the better results you'll get. And particularly you hear it all the time in football commentary or in any sort of football media, is that playing your role. And the idea, and I don't have no idea how a football team works at all, but I perceive that or interpret that as just focus on what you have to do and just focus on doing your best job on the day. And if everyone does that, then but from what you're saying, it sounds like it's kind of the opposite.
Yeah, well, what you're relating to is exactly the way I viewed it. Well, if I do my best and do my job and get the best out of what I can give, and then you do, and then you do, and then you do, then we're going to be fine. But the reality is you need to shift and you need to change. Sometimes things will happen to you that are outside of your control that force change. Yeah. And so that's the hardest way to do it, but it's probably the most effective at changing you or your perceptions or people. But I actually went across to Europe when the Olympics came in 2000, and I read 2 books, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which I hate the idea of. I hate even now the idea of influence or manipulation or tricking someone into doing something. I don't like that, but I read that book, got to the second chapter. It was about criticism as a form of communication and how ineffective it is. And I didn't need to read any more of the book, because that was the part that just hit me between the eyes, because criticism was the only form of communication that I understood. It's the way I spoke to myself. It's the way that I analysed and assessed my own performance in every facet. It's the way I viewed others, and that's the way I spoke to myself and others. So 9 times out of 10, criticism will be ineffective and create resentment, and maybe the 10 times out of 10 that it is effective, it might be effective in the short term, but it'll create that resentment again. So I had to flip it. So I flipped it, and I decided to change the way that I communicated to others, which is a little bit easier to do than the way that you communicate to yourself. And I know that to be true of myself still. So I'm still very critical of myself. But at least knowing that, then you're conscious of it. And once you're conscious of something, then you can put systems and processes and support systems and maybe change your wiring a little bit to be a little bit gentler on yourself at times. And so I think that was the big one for me around halfway through my playing career. And I did enjoy the second part of playing infinitely more.
But that is a huge shift. That is a complete 180 in how, I find that quite remarkable and I don't know how quickly it changed and how dramatically it changed in that next season. But I having only a vague idea of what the culture is like inside a football club, and particularly back then, to go from a certain way of being your entire life, which is thinking about yourself and thinking about doing the best you can and being the best, to read a chapter of a book and to reframe and to see the light is one thing. And I see the light all the time and then I forget about it. And then I just go back to my normal behavior. Whereas to be able to actually shift it and apply it in a way which actually sticks. Yeah. That is remarkable.
Well, if it sounds like it was a flick of a switch, well then I'm not.
Okay. So, but in 2001, when you come back from Europe and you've got all these thoughts in your mind, are you vocalizing them to anyone at the club?
So I wrote a mission statement for myself. It's actually in the back of the How to Win Friends and Influence People book. It was the 19th of October, 2000, and I was in Cairns. And I'd just been for a run along the beach, and there was this, in the dark, in the morning, and there was this awesome thunderstorm on the horizon. I can still picture it. I know exactly where I was. Came back and listened to music, and that's my meditation back in the day, and it probably still is now. Came back and wrote a mission statement that's dripping with arrogance still, dripping with me when I read it back. But the whole idea was to catch people doing the right thing rather than mindlessly telling them that they could do something better, to support people and find growth opportunities rather than giving them the wisdom of your knowledge in regards to what you think they should do now, and listening more than talking. So
It doesn't sound overly arrogant. And
No.
well, no, if I'll give you a read of it. It's just
okay.
like to fill anyone who can help me achieve my aims with the confidence to blah, blah,
Right,
blah. Like,
okay.
so like
Gotcha.
it's sort of come back to, hey, this is coming back
Still
to
about
me.
you.
Yeah.
This is coming back to me. But I shared that mission statement with a couple of teammates, a couple of coaches to hold me to account. So it's a great thing to have an ideal on what you want to change or habits that you would rather not have that you want to replace. And then you can have a process and a program or an idea of what you want to become. But I think we all need accountability.
Yep.
And especially when you're trying to change something that's been natural and become you for a long period of time, it's really difficult to do that without checks and balances on the other side. So I made sure I had that accountability on the other side.
This is jumping back a little bit, but when you were talking about the way you trained and it being demented, and I was thinking about the way you talked about the way your dad sort of trained you as a teenager. Is there a point where the ego stuff, or there's I don't know if ego is the right word,
It is.
but yeah, that no matter what's going on with the rest of the footy club, that like it was with when my dad was training me, at least if I put in the effort and don't fail at the things that I can control, I can kind of stand back and go, I did my job and I've succeeded regardless of the external things, like it was when I was being trained by my dad. At least I did everything he said I needed to do.
Yeah, I think that there is a little bit of that. I didn't realise at the time, but I was put on a pedestal because we were going through a period. We played in a final in 1994, and by the time we got to 2000, 2001, we didn't play another final until 2002. So it's 8 years where the club didn't play a final, let alone win a final, let alone contend for a flag. And I was a part of that journey, and I actually was put on a pedestal, and like at least we've got Bucks.
Yeah,
You know, he kicks out from fullback, he gets a handball, and then like 30 seconds later, he's having a shot at goal.
Yeah.
And it was nearly like, so Collingwood won the Wooden Spoon in 1999.
Yeah.
It was Shorey's last year as coach. I think we won.
Wooden Spoon, for those who don't know, last place on the ladder.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
So
We need a glossary of terms.
worst team in the comp.
No, wooden spoons are really effective at times.
Oh, it can
aren't
be,
they?
true. No, I'm a Melbourne supporter, I'm well aware.
But that's the juxtaposition. I felt proud of contributing. I'm proud of still performing, even in this environment where we weren't a great team, where we were struggling as a club. I felt proud of the fact that I could still, in and amongst that, still put my best foot forward and still work hard. But at the same time, had never felt comfortable. I loved being acknowledged, but I never felt comfortable being put above others.
Yeah.
And I've had to live with that my whole life. It makes me feel really uncomfortable when I am viewed differently to anyone, like let alone to my teammates or separate from your organisation. So when I went into coaching, I was really conscious of trying not to put one player on a pedestal because I knew how that felt. So don't market a Dale Thomas flat out. Don't market a Jamie Elliott. It puts burdens on them that, they might like part of it, but it's actually, there's a darker side to it that I think creates resentment.
I think about a former guest we've had on the podcast, Jack Watts. He's the perfect example of that. Perfect
Absolutely.
example.
And not everyone has the wherewithal to be able to cope with that. I think my coping mechanisms and my tough sort of outer skin, I suppose, and had been calloused to a point through my childhood and my early football days that I was, and I'd got enough satisfaction out of standing out that I was able to handle the idea of being FIGJAM or the idea of being, put above. But there was something that never sat well with me and I didn't like it. But if you don't like it, but you like some of it, but not that part, you don't get to pick and choose.
No.
Being kind of singled out and put on a pedestal. I've never like had that experience in the way that you've had, because I've read Agassi's book, where he finally wins a Grand Slam, the thing he's wanted to do his whole life, and his dad wanted him to do, and he wins and he feels nothing. So I'm genuinely wanting to know, like, from someone who has stood on the pedestal and been singled out as a hero, champion, favourite son of the club, loved.
Well, the Brownlow medal might be a good
Brownlow medal's good.
example of how you felt when you won the Brownlow.
I reflect on that now, and like anything around my playing days, it feels like a different person. It feels like a different life. And like there was a shitload of work that went into all of that, application, sacrifice, sometimes my sacrifice, and sometimes the sacrifice of relationships, of time with others, doing other things. So I don't think there was a lot of balance in what I did, especially in that first half of my career. I perceive myself and the world so much differently now than I did back then, even with that evolution halfway through. But yeah, I sort of don't know exactly how to hit the answer for you, other than my thing was I wanted to be a part of a premiership team, and like I've had to reconcile and accept that you don't always get what you want. Very rarely do we all get what we all want. But I didn't get that flag, and I would have loved to have played in one. I'd love to have coached one. But I've got to the point where I understand it doesn't actually define me. So what is success? If success was was being a premiership player or a premiership coach, well, then I haven't succeeded. But as soon as those words come out of my mouth, I know that that's not a fact, because I have succeeded. It's just I didn't get what I wanted.
So if you look back, and this is another part that really interests me, is you said that in your early playing career, you didn't have balance and relationships suffered. If you were to go back and redo your playing career with the knowledge you have now, do you think it would be possible to have the success that you had and have balance?
I don't know the answer to that, but so I've got great appreciation for Dad for being able to push me the way he did, to be able to drive me the way he did, to be able to mould me the way that he did. And even though I felt like I was doing everything to prove him wrong, I was actually proving him right. So I have great gratitude for that. But
hang on, what do you mean by that? You wanted to prove him?
Oh, well, I was sort of like, no, I'll show you. I will make it. I'll show you. But then I ended up actually doing the things that he had been trying to badger me into doing.
You believe that he didn't think you could make it?
No, he was telling me you need to work hard, you need to do this, you need to do this. And then I suppose in my mind, I was angry with Dad. So I went and did the things that he told me to do because I was angry with him. And then I got more than he or I ever thought, like reached a level and standard, because the progress happened like that, sort of 18, 19, 20 in Port Adelaide. But then he still wanted to tell me that I was doing stuff, that I needed to do stuff better. And there became a point where I go, well, Dad, you can't tell me anymore. Like I'm
good.
I'm good with this. But
I won the Brownlow yesterday.
But I don't know. I don't know. I have to believe that if I wasn't as driven, if it didn't mean as much to me personally in terms of self-worth, that I don't think I would have, because I wasn't, as much as people tell me, I wasn't there on talent. I was there because I worked harder than anyone else.
You reckon that's true?
I was there that I wanted it more than anyone else. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
I realise this is not a visual medium, but I want to show you a photo, and this is not to embarrass you. It's because I think it speaks to everything you've just spoken about. But I want to get your thoughts when you see this picture of what it makes you feel or what you're reflecting on. Again,
is this a picture of your top off? Is it
no, not quite.
Post gym.
Strangely aroused.
So again, this is not to embarrass you, but everything you've just said, this is what I'd see this photo, and it was an iconic photo. It was quite a.
Okay, so what we're looking at here is Nathan Buckley as an absolute monster. Like that is,
It looks like it was a pre-season. I don't know what year the pre-season.
That was in my steroid phase, yeah.
It was,
I knew we'd get a scoop.
So if you want to know the photo term, if you just type in Nathan Buckley topless as I did this morning into Google, you will get that shot. But
I didn't realise we were going to go to these areas.
but I'm interested. To me, that just speaks of desperation or the hard work that's been instilled in you. I'm interested to know, when you see that photo, when you reflect on that person, you feel like it's a different life. When you look at that person, how do you feel?
So that's pre-season 2006. So I'm 33. I'd just come off hammy surgery the year before. I only played the last sort of 10, 12 games of 2005. And I was at the tail, like I knew that I needed to, that my body was starting to fail me as such. So, and I wanted to wring the towel dry, because you sort of start to realise around then that once it's done, it's done. I ended up playing most of 2006 and then none of 2007 pretty much in my last year. I only played 5 games in the last year. So that was only 18 months away from retiring.
Wow.
But when
You went to bodybuilding after that?
when I look at that photo, I probably think, you were prepared to find out your limits physically, mentally, emotionally, in terms of a professional to contribute as much as you could and to see where you could take it. It was only probably Brenton Sanderson's a good mate of mine. We lived together in '94 and played at Collingwood in that first year. So he's seen for the last 30 years, he's probably the evolution that we've sort of touched on. He's seen a lot of that, and we're great mates now. And it would have been sort of 2018, 19, I reckon. And he actually said, he goes, I hate running around the town with you. He goes, you always have to be half a step ahead. You're always racing me. Sando had got to the point where he's just happy to run 5-minute K pace and just run for 40 minutes, get 8Ks in and then just move on, get back and have lunch, cut some vision up and coach the players. Where he reckons that I always needed to be half a step in front of him. So the problem is if he speeds up a little bit, then I'll speed up a little bit. And then you end up sort of one-upping. So he just got to the point where he hated it, because he reckons, we don't actually talk. You always make me run faster than I want to run. And you're not even running next to me anyway. You're half a step in front. And I only dropped that 5 years ago, of having to beat a PB in a run or having to reach a certain level. So that's been a recent sort of phenomenon for me to actually just do something for the enjoyment of it and to move because it's good for my body, rather than having to win, rather than having to best yourself. So that's the juxtaposition I go through at the moment. Do you need to be chasing something to be achieving, or are you achieving just by making the most of where you are? Answer that.
It's rhetorical for me anyway, because I don't have an answer. But there's a powerful juxtaposition. I've got this image in my head of the Nathan Buckley, the kid, for want of a better term, with tears in your eyes running around an oval with all that pressure, to now being able to go for a run just for the sake of enjoying it. I know that obviously it's different stages in your life and that you're trying to achieve different things, but there's something incredibly powerful about thinking about those two next to each other.
Yeah, the guy that had tears running down his cheeks was thankful that it was raining periodically, because he never wanted to show weakness, never wanted to show vulnerability. And I reckon if people did know, it would just be like, freak. Like he's like, whether that's the way I was positioning it or not, but I reckon it was nearly like, because
can't show this.
My frequency was up here. Like when I was in that mode, like I would have been that difficult to approach. I had that much armor around me that people probably got to the point where they knew they weren't going to get to me. They were just going to bounce off this armor that you'd sort of put on, and this intensity that, like, if they could get anywhere near me, like through the intensity that I displayed, and and it was partly a protective mechanism. So
you wouldn't have said to anyone, "I'm struggling here," or did you even see it in those terms?
No, I didn't see it. And then like there was like drinking like heavily on a weekend, because if I couldn't control it all, then I wanted to forget it. So I went down that cycle. I want to control everything, but then I want to control nothing. So it was like that coping mechanism. I want to forget about it, and now I'm doing what I do. So there was a lot of ineffective, damaging sort of behaviours that were in there, largely around sort of probably the way you viewed yourself as much as anything. But a lot of numbing and coping strategies to try and handle that intensity of performance. And I had coaches that were continually trying to have this conversation with me. But I was
coaches trying to talk to you about your intensity.
Probably, I think the early one, the one that was consistent, was my attitude, on-field attitude towards my teammates, and my very visible disappointment, vitriol, whatever you want to call it. My body language was terrible. At those early stages.
Yeah,
and it was disrespectful to myself, to my teammates, to the team, to the club, to the AFL, to the position, and the benefit that I had of running around in the middle of the MCG to behave the way I behaved was disgraceful, really. When I step back, I've never actually come to that or voiced that that specifically because. And I don't think I clearly wasn't conscious of the impact, because if I really cared and was conscious of the impact, it would have been something that I would have changed.
Yeah, of course.
But I didn't have the awareness, and two, I probably didn't care enough, because I thought that I was justified in seeing the world the way I saw it and being the way that I was. Otherwise, I would have changed it. What I learned from that in retrospect is, as a coach, you can give, or a parent, or a leader, a mentor, you can give someone the right information, but it just might be at the wrong time. They might not have the ability to absorb the information that you're giving them, or the direction, or the advice. So it's so important to be consistent with the feedback that you give. And it might be the 20th time over a couple of year period that you've given that same bit of feedback before that feedback meets the person where they can receive it and then do something about it.
It's like reading a book at the right time.
Well, yeah, I think it's, and once again, it's what you put into it. That, like, communication is the response you get. So I can talk flat out to you, and give you the best of my wisdom, advice, etc. But if your mind is elsewhere, or there's something going on that you can't absorb it, well, then it doesn't matter how good my stuff is. It's got to be received in the right way and in the right manner, and it's got to be able to be received and understood, and then you've got to be able to action on it. So being consistent is really important. And I was grateful that I had coaches and teammates that were consistently giving me the right feedback, and it took me a while. It took me longer than it should have for that to get in, but that was a big part of me realising that I needed to shift and change. It wasn't just, and the way I told it was probably a light bulb moment in self, but there was an abundance of information and
People
feedback coming back the other way that had been coming for a while.
Yeah.
Does it have any, like, when you look back on, whether it be like early coaches or teammates or anyone at the club, really, when you look back and with this new kind of reflection and the knowledge and wisdom you now have, do you look back on those people or any of those people differently who tried to kind of show you the way? And
feel sorry for them. But then once again, like, that's that part of accepting what it was, accepting who you were
at that time.
At that time, the saying that I love, actually saw it up on a basketball stadium when my young fellow was, about 5 or 6 years ago. It says, do your best, and when you know better, do better.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the importance of knowing yourself.
Was that intensity when you're at your most intense and unapproachable, and that sort of, I can imagine. I think because that's probably the perception I had in my head of just this sort of like machine of a man, you know, just like training at the highest level, playing at the highest level. Did that intensity, and I'm not fishing for anything at all here, but did that intensity that you had while playing sport trickle into your life as well, into your personal?
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, because I think you can't. I think what you are, like what I was there, and that need for validation and a sense of self that I was searching for in my football, I think in the end you do, even though that you put the footy on the pedestal, I still wanted it everywhere else as well. And you're probably still carrying that less than mentality in every facet of your life. But then when you sort of get to I got to the situation where, you know, latterly you talk about being that machine and being hard to approach. I think I was still viewed like that through the early stages of my coaching. And there was when the family unit started sort of breaking down sort of around 2017, 18, I think the players and staff saw through that, didn't see the machine anymore. They saw a bloke that was struggling and vulnerable. And it actually, the irony of that, and I didn't realise it at the time, I wasn't aware of this, but what happened was all of a sudden the players and staff saw that they could support and help me when I'd only ever offered that. I'd never welcomed it or even provided an avenue or a channel to be supported and assisted, because I still felt like I needed to be bulletproof, needed to be the one that was always consistent, metronomic, reliable, swallow all the pressure, take it all for everyone else type thing. That was the mentality at the time. But when all of a sudden, when my heart was a lot closer to my sleeve than it had been, and I was more open and vulnerable at times than I had been, all of a sudden people could help me. And I think that just created a greater depth of relationship and connection. And I've got no doubt, I mean, once again, I enjoyed the second half of the coaching because it forced there through no sort of decision of my own and out of control, but it strangely made football and my appreciation for the environment at the club even greater than it had been. And I'd been in the place for 24 years at that point.
You said at three-quarter time of the 2018 grand final, your address was to the boys. You just said, I just want to let you know, I love you. That was, you said in the middle of the MCG.
Whoa.
As far as when you look back on your career, the relationships, that must be a point to showcase how far you'd come emotionally to be able to do that.
Yeah, well, I suppose like going the prelim that year, just sort of the analogy we used was Japanese pottery, kintsugi, which is basically an art form where they'll break a plate and then put it back together, but they'll lace it with gold and make it, beautiful, and then put it back together, and then it's on display. The whole idea being that even something that's broken can be put together as a better version of itself after it's been broken. But I was just talking about all of us have had like the different challenges. At that stage, Trev Varco had lost his sister earlier that year. We'd lost players to ACLs. Couple of younger guys that were really, Darcy Moore and Jamie Elliott had hardly played that year and weren't going to go into those games. And some of the staff members that had, human things happen to them. Life goes on, and there's so much that happens around a football club. And I think what we don't see from the media perspective and what you don't see from the outside is that humanity is the centre of the connection, the community of a football club. They lean on each other so heavily. But yeah, when we got to the granny, felt like the boys, we'd already succeeded. We were in a great position to attack it. And we had a real crack at it. We were bested on the day. Like, I'm shattered for the players at the time because I thought, shit, they put so much, they emptied out so much. We got everything out of ourselves in that particular season, and we'd grown so much from, we'd worked really hard through 15, 16, 17. The resilience project stuff was just starting to kick in, and we'd sort of
Beefy was taking
Beefy
off.
was telling it, especially when we played Carlton. We wheeled him out. We had the right program and processes. But yeah, we were 99%. We got 99% of the way and did things brilliantly.
We I do want to mention that after that grand final, I've found the older I get, the more often you can say, I don't know, or I don't have the answer. It's a really empowering thing to say. I've found that leading a business here, it's a positive thing to be able to say, I don't have the answer. The first thing you said after the loss to the players, interestingly enough, you weren't standing in front of them addressing them, you're sitting with them. And everyone was looking for you and you said, I don't know how to lead you right now. I just don't know how to lead you. I'm really hurting. And I loved that moment. For someone who had, from the year 2015, became fascinated by you as a person, as a coach, and your club. I love that moment. I thought it was really special.
Yeah.
So you speak about, for example, drinking on the weekend, maybe after a game, as a way of most of the week you're in control and you're absolutely doing everything you can, then you're out of control when you're drinking, you're numbing yourself. Were you aware that that was what you were doing? And in all that time, did you ever ask anyone for help when you felt like, because you're clearly acting in a way that's like you're trying to just cope with everything that's going on in your life, but did you ever ask for help at any point?
It's probably like that behaviour was probably just blended into the background at the time because it was nearly the done thing. So you go hard on the field, you go hard off the field. You know, the drinking culture was probably starting to come off then. Social drugs probably was starting to kick in, but I never got caught up in that. But whatever the vice of the time was to escape the pressures that you put on yourself, I was going to find. But for me, it was probably wasn't really as aware of that I needed help. I didn't feel like I wanted other people's help. I wanted to do it myself. I wanted to be self-sufficient. So back in those days, it was bury it. If it didn't feel good, bury it. If I actually sat up, I could vividly recall this. I sat up on my bed in 1996. I'd been at the club for 3 years. I don't know what precipitated it. It was the middle of the season. Everything was going well. You know, life was pretty good in a relationship. And in the first home that I'd bought in Mont Albert, I sat up in the bed and I thought to myself, I reckon I know why people commit suicide and why they would end their life. And that was apropos of nothing in particular. The thought popped into my head. It didn't go any further, and I've never felt it or thought it again like that. And there was no reason for that thought to pop into my head that I could really unpack and consider. And it stands in isolation, which is why it's so memorable for me. I had everything going well in my life, but I thought that. And I thought, why did I think that? I got no idea. And did I ask for help then? No. Look, I just thought, well, that's something that's a vulnerability or a less than or a weakness that I need to bury deep down. So I think burying something or dealing with something yourself or pushing it down definitely develops and calluses you. It hardens you. It can develop resilience, but it can also be the thing that trips you up. So I wanted to be self-sufficient. I didn't want to be weak or vulnerable. I trained at Port Adelaide where where there's a tap on the side of the oval, and it was weak to even think about going and have a drink out of that tap when you were training. So things have changed, thankfully. We don't view resilience and toughness now the way we did then, thankfully. But yeah, so I never asked for help. So when that came about later on, when the marriage was breaking down, I did. I just said, I'm no good here. I remember, being the first day of preseason 2018. Remember having a realisation at home, I was gutted, and came to the club, and it was the first day of pre-season, and I really didn't want to be there. I was a 2 out of 10, and I went straight to the chief of footy at the time, Jeff Walsh. Just said, mate, this has just happened. My head's nowhere. I'm gonna do the initial presentation to the group, because this is the first time that all of the staff and players have been in the room together. Like, you don't get a choice. This is well, I could have not fronted, but my attitude's always been to front. So I fronted, delivered a chat to the group, which, when I look back on, was raw, was authentic. It wasn't talking about where I was, where my head space or heart space was at the time, but it was raw and authentic about where we were and how important it was to lean on one another. It was nearly like a cryptic message.
Yeah.
But it set the direction on how we were going to approach the challenge of, picking ourselves up and getting back into finals. And I walked out of that. I walked into Walshy's room, and I said, mate, I'm going to head home. So I did, and that would have been abnormal. So I did reach out for help in some shape or form there, and that was probably the start of being, probably more vulnerable and open, because you couldn't hide from that, because it was so raw and so new what I was dealing with that you couldn't hide it.
Do you remember in that week you just spoke of? Do you remember the phone call we had, or do you remember catching up in that week?
No. Did I spoke to you about it?
Yeah.
Oh no, I did. I did ring you.
Left
Yeah,
training and we caught up.
Yeah,
I think it was in that week.
it would have been.
And we hadn't spoken in probably a year, I reckon it might have been. And so I was surprised to see you call. So happy to see you call. But then you said, "Can you catch up now?" And I happened to be really close. And you told me everything that was going on. And I just remember thinking, like, this person is good. Like, I didn't have advice. I just listened. And I remember thinking, this person is going to be, it's going to be hard, but the fact that you're reaching out and talking to people, I just remember thinking he's going to get the support that he needs, definitely.
Well, I think I'm glad that you reminded me of that, because what I wanted to do even then, was to not show weakness internally. I spoke to a couple of people that I needed to early, but I think by reaching out to you, and there was actually another person, a therapist that I spoke to consistently over, probably the next couple of months. They were one out, one back. They weren't part of the internal football environment. So I think that's important to, I think you need people internally could support me and be there for me, but I think it's also important to have someone who has a different perspective of who you are and just sees the human element of you rather than the job that you have to do, which is why the idea of therapy, I think, makes sense, because that person is a neutral person that you can bounce things off. They can hold the mirror up for you so that you can work things out for yourself. Sometimes, even with our best mates, we won't tell them that we're struggling because we're too proud, and we won't tell them that we're going really well because we don't want them to feel shit or to feel less than. So if you think about the bandwidth on that last 10%, really good and really shit, we might not even do that with our mates. But if you can, well then what a beautiful thing that is. If you can be absolutely transparent, and if you feel like you're low as shark shit, well, you can say that, and that person can walk alongside whilst you work out and bounce around what you need to do next.
Yeah.
You mentioned before the breakdown of a family unit, and I'm just interested to know from your point of view, what growth took, or what did you learn about yourself through that?
Well, plenty. plenty. The thing that I learned around that was that as much as you think that you can control everything in your existence, you can't. And that's like that book found me. The Courage to Dislike found me when I needed it. You're not going to get everything you want. And for a person who sort of thought that they could always, if you just work harder, you can have it, that's probably taught me that it doesn't matter how hard you work. And then the other part is you got to accept that, there's stuff that you're responsible for. If there's a breakdown of something, there's stuff that you're responsible for, and there's stuff that you cannot take responsibility for. As long as you own your shit. And I suppose front up in that space as much as possible. Then, as long as you're kind to yourself, I think that's the big part. So it was the toughest part of my life, I reckon, and it's had the most impact on the way I see the challenge of living happily or healthily in a really positive way. But I'm still learning as we go along.
There's a beautiful image of, thanks for answering that. There's a beautiful image of, I reckon it's Jet running into your arms.
I thought that was the photo you were going to show me.
Ah, right.
Because
probably more meaningful. Probably should have shown you that one.
I was going to show me all pumped up.
There's an incredible photo of Jet running into your arms after, I think it was a prelim.
That was after the Richmond prelim, in 18.
And I mean, it's one of my favourite photos. It says so many things, but it speaks of the admiration and the love that your boys have for you. What do you want more than anything for your boys?
See, I don't feel that from them a lot. And life's been pretty challenging for them last 4 or 5 years, COVID and the home life breaking down. What I want for them is to have a healthy sense of themselves and to love that sense of self. I'd love them to be curious, to go and search out and understand that there's plenty of things that they don't know about, and to stay open-minded to the possibility of things. So that stops them from being hedged to one particular belief. But then again, I didn't get past that for a long time. So I don't expect, I expect they'll go through their journey. Oh, I'd love them to feel loved by those that they love in particular. I don't really reckon there's too much more.
Can I ask about your, as a dad, being a parent is bloody hard. I mean, they're only 2 and 4. So it's hard in a different way, and I'm sure it's going to get harder in different ways as they get older. And I find myself always trying to navigate the challenge of the parent that I want to be versus the parent that I am on a day-to-day basis with them. Do you find it hard to not default to the way that your dad parented you when things get tough?
Great question. What I found and what I've tried to do increasingly with anything that I'm involved with, any people that I'm involved with, is how do you remove ego from that challenge? So how do you take ego out of it? Because I think as soon as ego's into something, well, then you can miss you miss plenty of information. I think you can overlook other people. You're probably less conscious about what's going on if you allow ego to dominate. So I think removing ego from parenting is the hardest thing to do for me, because these are your kids. So it is the very essence of ego. This is a representation of you. Like at least 50% of that is you in DNA anyway. So I think that if I asked my boys, they would say that I'm closer to Dad, that I am quite disciplined, and I do have potentially unrealistic expectations of them, or that stretch expectations of them.
You mean you're closer to your dad in how you?
Yeah.
And how does that make you feel to know that?
I reckon there's elements of what I provide to them that they would perceive that I would think that I'm more middling, that I'm softer.
Yeah.
But they would probably suggest that I'm up that way. So I'm sort of conscious of the disconnect in that. So I try to have that convo with them as often as I can when I can get them off their devices and out of their rooms.
The ego thing's fascinating because I feel like I'm doing that already. Like I notice my youngest is like I think challenges me more and pushes me a bit more than the older child did. And I can see myself, I had a chat to my wife about it a few months ago, and my relationship with him has changed so much since. And this is just with a 2-year-old. But I found myself all the time having a lot of ego about it, going, well, it's not going the way I want it to go. This isn't happening the way I want it to happen. I had a plan for today and he doesn't, and it's not what I wanted. And I spoke to her about it because she's so much better at this naturally than me. And I realized through this conversation that if I just like throw that ego out, I didn't refer to it as ego, but now that you say it, it's exactly what it was. And actually just stop and react to what he needs at the moment, try and be with him and think, what do you need right now? That friction point went away, and suddenly our relationship in the last 2 months has grown more than it did in the first 2 years.
That's awesome. What a great realisation to make. So it has taught you. I think I was very similar because it's always about getting somewhere and achieving something.
Yeah.
But I think in the early stages, it's just being. Just be. Be in the space, interact.
And what do you need from me?
Play. Yeah. And then like you tell me what you need. It's like that's I'm still challenged by that, not just as a parent, as a partner, as a mate, always having to do something or even internally with myself, like need to have progress, need to have action, need to be working towards something. And I judge myself if I'm not. But the reality is you can just sit. You can just be.
Yeah.
So grateful for your time today.
Can I just, before we wrap it up,
we've told about the courage to be disliked. You have to.
No, I just feel I need to clarify one thing that happened years ago, and you may have no idea of this. And if you have no idea of this, then this is a stupid thing for me to bring up and extremely embarrassing. There was a day, I forget what year it was, but I was going to the footy with a bunch of guys, and we're going to be sitting in a box, like one of the corporate boxes. And beforehand, we were having lunch or something beforehand. And for whatever reason, I don't know why we were talking about this, but we had the realization like, oh, weird. Nathan Buckley and James Hird, both like biggest players of their generation, both married Tanyas. I was like, oh, that's so weird. That's a coincidence. Anyway, and then I like Googled to make sure that was right. It's like, yep, it is right. It is right. So then anyway, that was just one of the random conversations we had on the way to the footy. And then we went to the footy. I was sitting in the box, and at like quarter time or whatever, I was in the front row. And as you know, in a corporate box, if you're in the front row, it's sort of lowered down a bit. And then the people at the back are standing up higher. And so I then opened my phone to check messages at quarter time. And because the last thing I looked at my phone was Tanya Buckley. So there's a big photo of Tanya Buckley on my phone as I opened it. And at that moment, I realized that Nathan Buckley was in this box as well that day, literally standing right behind me. And I was like, shit. And I needed to say it because I don't know if you saw that. Because if you did see that, it's the fucking weirdest thing to see. And I just needed to clarify and explain why I had Tanya on my phone that day.
Up until this point, I just thought creep. Creep.
Yep, fair.
But
I'm surprised you did this interview.
I was just letting him sweat. He's mentioned that. So 2 hours ago we started. He's been sitting on it for 2 hours. He's lost 4 kilograms in sweat.
You didn't.
No, I didn't see that.
Great.
It's an incredible journey that you're on. You've been so articulate and generous with sharing that today. So I remember when we first started this podcast, I remember asking if it'd be something you're interested in doing. And I think at the time you felt quite overexposed with all the stuff going in your life. But I'm so happy that we've got you now at this point in your life because I feel like it's just going to help so many people. So thank you so much. And it's just been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, guys. I love what you do. I know that you've got an avid listener base, and I'm one of them. And please keep producing.
Thanks, bro.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
There's something about like whenever I'm in the presence of AFL players or like, you know, AFL players, it reminds me of when I was a kid and I used to do Auskick. Did you guys do Auskick when you were kids?
Yes, for one. Yeah.
And so Auskick, for those who don't know, it's like when you're a kid, you go and do like a clinic and AFL players come and sort of teach the kids how to kick and take the clinic essentially. And I remember so vividly when I would have been like 10, probably younger, being there genuinely thinking, I know I'm too young now, but if I can really show these players, they might go like, he's got something. I genuinely had the feeling, and so having Bucks here, I was just like thinking, like, if I could just show him a kick,
Oh, you thought that even
I reckon he would be impressed. Anyway, just thinking that then. What a guy. Isn't he unbelievable?
Yeah.
Oh, he's awesome.
Yeah.
He's so good.
Yeah.
I think the thing that stood out the most for me in that conversation was the switch from him having a mindset of to win here, it's all about me. Like the more I focus on myself, the better chance we are of winning here. To it's not about me, it's about everyone else and the person next to me. I think it was the most significant thing. And I thought maybe what we could talk about now is, you know what it's like to sit down with someone and that person makes it all about themselves when you might go to them with a problem or an issue or just talking to them, catching up, and you feel like we've just talked about that person flat out. It's actually named for, there's a really great article in the Huffington Post entitled How to Fight the Urge to Always Make Everything About Yourself. And we'll put a link to the article in the show notes. And just gave really good practical tips on how to remain present in a conversation in a way that is not making it about yourself. Because sometimes we can do it, I think, because maybe we're nervous or we're a bit anxious or we're just trying to fill the conversation, and we know the most about ourselves, so we talk about ourselves, and then we go home, we think, oh my God, I just talked about myself the whole time.
Well, there's that, but there's also the dream of like, you know, sitting at your desk at the office and the boss popping their head in and just going, well done, mate. You're doing really, really well. Like, I live for that shit. Like, that's really all you want. And so I think that's sort of like the kind of, you know, apple that people are often going for.
Well, I think the version of this whole thing that I went to in my mind was that the feeling you get if you've hung out with a group of people or a person and you walk away going, I spoke about myself way too much then.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's just such an uncomfortable feeling. And the article that I found in the Huffington Post, it speaks to that massively, but just some nice strategies on how you can avoid having that feeling of regret afterwards, which I think a lot of people have. And as I said before, it can be just out of care. You're trying to give people, someone will tell you something they're going through and you'll straight away tell them a thing that you've been through because you want them to feel less alone, but you can kind of hijack it in doing that.
I'm really excited about this because I actually feel like the last few times I've been drinking and like at a party, I've woken up each morning thinking I made last night way too much about myself.
Oh, right.
And spoke about myself way too much. And it's starting to really, I'm quite self-conscious of it.
I feel like your version of that would be pretty mild, but yeah.
Anyway, it's creeping in. So,
but it is. I think it's a really common feeling. I think a lot of people have that, and I think it's nice to just, if you feel like there's an issue for you or you know someone. I mean, it might be a bit hard to send this to someone if you think it's a problem for them.
Yeah, it's like whenever I've tried to give the book The Courage to be Disliked to someone, it can come across a little bit offensive, where it's like, because it's like I think they think. Anyway.
So it's only to every person you've ever met ever.
Yeah, exactly. Offended thousands of people.
So they, within this article, have 5 tips on how to, in their words, how to fight the urge to always make everything about yourself. So they refer to it as autobiographical listening or conversational narcissism.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah. So I especially love autobiographical listening. It's
That's
just like,
brilliant.
Oh, that relates to me. I'll talk about that. Oh, that relates to me. I can talk about that. And so you sort of inject yourself in every single time, which is possible, which I think has its place and can work to establish common ground and connection, all that kind of stuff. But this is just if you feel like you're a little bit nervous that you maybe talk about yourself too much. But so the first, so there's 5 tips here. The first one was to practice empathy.
It's like sympathy, but different. I'll tell you about it later. We haven't got time now, but yeah.
No, I've just realised there's genuinely a spelling mistake in their article. It says practice empathic listening.
Empathic. So just to fill everyone in on what Hugh's been doing for the last 15 years, you've heard of GEM, gratitude, empathic, and mindfulness.
No one heard that. It's coming out. No one's going to hear that, but it's fine. That's good.
We'll absolutely stay in. Empathic.
Oh my God.
Okay.
I'm so disappointed in myself.
But
Practice.
I'm happy for the clip we get to
Really?
take out of the episode and really highlight. George, mark that for
Practice empathic listening, which is a word. So to practice, I'm going to say empathetic. To practice empathetic listening, it's like that is where you're listening to understand, not listening to reply. And I reckon that's such a trap that we all fall into. Is like, what do I say here? What's expected of me here? How am I going to respond in the best possible way, as opposed to just listening to understand? Like, my aim here is to understand exactly what they're saying. Simple as that. So that's the first one, which I really, really like, because you can just remind yourself of that when you're sitting down with someone, just like, I'm listening to understand here.
I think, Hugh, you're extremely good at that, and I think I am terrible at that.
Oh.
I think
Really?
I'm a bandit for autobiographical listening.
Really?
Yeah. Unfortunately. Can you text me that article, mate?
The second one is verify what you're hearing. So often just saying back to the person, like summarizing, rather than saying, oh, actually, do you know, like if someone says, I played golf the other day, and you go, well, I actually played golf the other day and I did this. It's just oh yeah, so you played golf, and just like leading them, like helping them with their story almost, like you're sort of prompting them to keep going with their story. So just repeating back what they say.
Yep.
Is a really good one. Number 3, remember times you've been on the other side. So remembering a time where you have tried to share something with someone and they've made it about themselves and how it feels.
Yeah.
Like how just icky that feels. And then just like, I don't want to make that person feel like that, I guess. Number 4, ask the person what they want out of the conversation.
Oh, that's a good one.
The way I see that playing out is like when they've started sharing what they're going to share, just saying, so you after advice here, do you want me to listen? Do you want me to relate? Just like actually asking them what they need would be really, I've never done it before, but I feel like it'd be
My first imagining of that happening just looked so awkward. But that sounds better. I'm just imagining someone talking to me and me saying, sorry, what do you actually want from this?
Oh, you just said it in a nice way though.
Yeah, it's sort of like sounds like a first date question.
Yeah, so what do you...
What are you actually after here? What do you want from me? Wow.
But you could phrase it in a different way. You could say like, you know, what do you need from me in this situation, or how can I make this easier for you, or what could I do to something like that? I think is a really good thing to do. And then the last one, which I think is a really good one to remember, is just consider if you're matching or topping. So matching's like, I played golf the other day and I actually shot 4 over. Oh, I played golf the other day, I'd shot 4 over as well. It's like, okay, well, that's my story going. Or topping it, like, yeah, I actually shot 2 over the other day. So
I feel like that's like the Trump Donald Trump kind of approach, which is like, you know, it's like I played golf the other day. Oh, really? I played golf at the best golf course in the world. Yeah. Everyone is saying it's the best golf course. People are saying I hit the best shots. People are saying that.
Yeah, so you could just rather match your topping, you could just call it trumping.
Yeah,
are you trumping?
Well, I guess it is trumping.
Yeah, it's perfect. Are you trumping?
I'm sure people have put those together before.
That he's always trumping.
He's always trumping.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. There's a phrase that I hear some people use in conversation that always irks me.
Be empathic.
That always irks me, and I think it's because it's that, and I never really put my foot on it. But when you say something and they say the best is when, and then launch into a story to top yours, and I understand that it's there, like it comes from a good place. I think it's trying to be entertaining and tell a funny story that they've heard and try and sort of build up the momentum. But it always feels like, oh, so you don't think my thing was good, and you're just trying to do better.
Yeah.
But I get where it comes from, but it always feels like a kind of topping move.
But I think it's nice to take those. I mean, maybe you don't have an issue with this, but if you do feel like, if you do have that regretful feeling sometimes, I think drinking can be when alcohol's involved, it can be a bit of an issue for people. Before you start drinking, just remember those things.
Great. They're really good. Can you actually send me that?
Yes, I actually will. I'd also like people to write the word empathic, just write it in front of them. And I'd like them to look at it with an empathetic lens towards me and go, oh, yeah, I can see how we did that.
I'd like you to look at it with an empathic lens. But No, look, I think it's an easy mistake to make because you usually say empathetic, not empathic, which are probably versions of the same thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've ever said empathic, but I'm going to now to prove that I know it's a word and that I know how to read it.
Yeah. You got to do something because you're flailing. Thanks, you. That's awesome. That's really helpful.
Yeah. And thank you, Nathan Buckley.
Absolutely.
And Beefy. Probably more thanks to Nathan Buckley, a little bit thanks to Beefy.
Equal thanks to both from me.
Okay. All right. See you next time, guys.